I watched my mother-in-law walk out of my nursery holding what I thought was my sleeping son, but the nanny camera had just recorded her switching him with another baby. My hands shook as I rewound the footage for the third time. There it was, clear as day. Margaret carefully lifting my 6-week-old Lucas from his crib, placing him in a carrier bag, then reaching for another baby from what looked like a second carrier she'd brought with her. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. I'd been sound asleep in the next room, recovering from my emergency C-section, trusting the woman who'd insisted on staying with us to help with the baby. The woman who'd raised my husband David. The woman who'd held my hand during labor when David got stuck in traffic. The woman who'd been nothing but loving and supportive since the day I met her 2 years ago. I met David at a coffee shop in downtown Portland where I worked as a barista while finishing my nursing degree. He was this gentle, soft-spoken accountant who came in every Tuesday and Thursday, always ordering the same thing, large coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream. For 3 months, he'd smile politely and leave a good tip. Then one rainy October morning, he finally asked if I'd like to get dinner sometime. Our first date lasted 6 hours. We talked about everything, his work at a small firm specializing in nonprofit accounting, my dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, our shared love of hiking and old movies. He told me about growing up with just his mom after his dad died when he was 12. How Margaret had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. How close they were. "She's going to love you," he said, squeezing my hand across the restaurant table. And she did. Margaret welcomed me with open arms from day one. She was this tiny, energetic woman in her early 60s with silver hair always perfectly styled and bright blue eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She'd lost her husband to a heart attack 15 years earlier and had poured all her energy into David and her career as an elementary school principal. When David proposed after 18 months, Margaret cried happy tears and immediately started talking about grandchildren. "I can't wait to spoil your babies," she'd say, and something about the way she said it always made me feel warm and loved. I'd lost my own mother to cancer when I was 22, and having Margaret felt like getting a mom back. The wedding was perfect. Small ceremony in Margaret's backyard, just family and close friends. She'd spent weeks helping me plan every detail, from the flowers to the menu. During her mother of the groom speech, she said, "I didn't just gain a daughter-in-law today. I gained the daughter I never had." David and I bought a small house 20 minutes from Margaret's place. She came over for Sunday dinners, helped me paint the nursery when I got pregnant, and held my hand through morning sickness and doctor's appointments when David couldn't get off work. When Lucas was born after 14 hours of labor that ended in an emergency C-section, Margaret was right there. She was the first person besides David to hold him. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Absolutely perfect. Those first weeks home were brutal. The C-section recovery was harder than I'd expected, breastfeeding was a nightmare, and I barely slept 2 hours at a time. When Margaret offered to stay with us for a few weeks to help, David and I practically wept with relief. She was incredible. She took the night shift, brought Lucas to me for feedings, then handled diaper changes and getting him back to sleep so I could rest. She cooked meals, did laundry, and somehow managed to keep the house running while I focused on healing and bonding with my son. "You need your strength," she'd say whenever I tried to help with household tasks. "Let Grandma handle everything else." I installed the nanny camera partly out of paranoia, all those news stories about nannies and babysitters behaving badly, but mostly because I wanted to be able to check on Lucas when I wasn't in the room. The camera had night vision and motion detection, and I could watch the live feed on my phone app. For 6 weeks, everything seemed normal. Margaret was the perfect grandmother and helper. The camera mostly showed her gently caring for Lucas, singing to him, or sitting in the rocking chair just watching him sleep. Until last night. I'd felt something was off for the past few days. Lucas seemed different somehow. More fussy than usual, crying in a way that sounded unfamiliar. When I mentioned it to Margaret, she said all babies went through phases and not to worry. David agreed with his mother, and I started to think I was just being an overprotective new mom. But then Lucas wouldn't latch properly during his 2 a.m. feeding. He kept turning his head away, crying in frustration. His cry sounded wrong. Different. I tried for 20 minutes before giving up and preparing a bottle instead. As I sat there feeding him, something nagged at me. The shape of his ear looked slightly different. The birthmark on his shoulder seemed lighter. I told myself I was being crazy. Sleep deprivation was making me paranoid. Babies changed quickly in those early weeks. But I couldn't shake the feeling. After putting Lucas back in his crib, I decided to check the nanny camera footage from earlier that night. Just to ease my mind. Just to prove to myself that I was being ridiculous. The first few hours showed Margaret checking on Lucas around 11 p.m., then again at midnight. Normal grandmother behavior. Then at 2:47 a.m., she entered the nursery with what looked like a large diaper bag. She moved quietly to the crib and carefully lifted Lucas out. That's when my blood ran cold. She didn't take him to the changing table. She didn't sit in the rocking chair. Instead, she placed him in what I now realized was a carrier bag. Then she reached into her own bag and pulled out another baby. Another sleeping infant who looked remarkably similar to Lucas. The switch took less than 2 minutes. She placed the new baby in Lucas's crib, adjusted his position to match how I'd left my son, then quietly left the room carrying my real baby. I watched this impossible scene 3 times before my brain could process what I was seeing. My mother-in-law had stolen my baby and replaced him with another child. The baby I'd just fed wasn't my son. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might have a panic attack. None of this made sense. Why would Margaret do this? Where was my real baby? Whose child was sleeping in my nursery? I wanted to run into the nursery and confront her, but Margaret had left for her own house around 6 a.m. as usual, saying she'd be back that evening. The baby was alone in there. The wrong baby. Some stranger's child that I'd been caring for all day without knowing it. I crept into the nursery and stared at the sleeping infant. Now that I knew to look, I could see the differences. This baby's nose was slightly wider. His chin had a different shape. The birthmark on his shoulder was definitely lighter than Lucas's. How had I missed these details? Because you trust the people you love. Because the idea that your mother-in-law would steal your baby and replace him with another child is so insane that your brain refuses to consider it. I needed to call David, but what would I say? Honey, your mother stole our baby and left us with a different one? He'd think I was having a postpartum breakdown. He'd want to have me evaluated. And Margaret, she was his whole world. He'd never believe she could do something so horrible. I needed proof. More than just the camera footage, which she could claim was doctored or misunderstood. I needed to figure out where my real baby was and why she'd done this. The rest of that day was the longest of my life. I went through the motions of caring for this stranger's baby while my mind raced with questions and theories. Was Lucas even alive? Was this some kind of black market baby trafficking scheme? Was Margaret suffering from dementia or some kind of psychotic break? When David came home from work, I tried to act normal, but he could tell something was wrong. You seem tense, he said, kissing my forehead. Everything okay? Just tired, I managed. You know how it is. He picked up the baby, the wrong baby, and cooed at him. How's Daddy's little man? Were you good for Mommy today? Watching my husband bond with another woman's child while our real son was God knows where made me feel physically sick. But I couldn't say anything. Not yet. Margaret arrived at 7 p.m. with groceries and her usual cheerful demeanor. How are my favorite boys? She asked, giving David a hug and taking the baby from his arms. I studied her face for any sign of guilt or nervousness. Nothing. She looked at this child with the same loving expression she'd always had for Lucas. Either she was a phenomenal actress, or something else was going on that I didn't understand. He seemed a little fussier today, I said carefully, watching for her reaction. Oh, they all have their difficult days, she replied easily. Growing so fast at this age. Probably another growth spurt coming. That night, I pretended to go to bed early but instead sat in the dark with my phone, watching the live camera feed. Margaret followed her usual routine, checking on the baby around 11 p.m., then going to the guest room. I waited until 2 a.m., then 3 a.m. Nothing unusual happened. Maybe she only did the switch when she thought I was completely out of it from pain medication or exhaustion. Maybe last night was the first time. Or maybe she was being more careful now. I barely slept, checking the camera feed every few minutes until morning. The next day, I decided to do some investigating while Margaret was out grocery shopping. I'd been wondering about that large bag she'd brought with her that night. She always left her purse and overnight bag in the guest room, but I'd never seen her with a bag that large before. I felt terrible about snooping, but I needed answers. The guest room looked normal, her suitcase, purse, some personal items. But when I checked the closet, I found it. A large canvas tote bag pushed way back behind her coats. Inside were baby clothes, diapers, bottles, and a folder with papers that made my blood freeze. Birth certificate for a baby named Marcus Chen, born the same day as Lucas. Medical records. And a handwritten note that said, "Payment received in full. No further contact." My legs gave out and I sat hard on the bed, staring at these papers. Marcus Chen. The baby currently sleeping in my nursery had a name, and it wasn't Lucas. There were more papers in the folder. What looked like correspondence with an attorney about private adoption. A receipt for $25,000 paid to something called Blessed Beginnings Adoption Services. And most shocking of all, a letter from Margaret to someone named Jennifer Chen, dated 3 months ago. Dear Jennifer, I understand how difficult your situation must be. As discussed, I can provide a loving home for your son while you get back on your feet. The family I have in mind are wonderful people who will give him everything he needs. Please don't worry, this is all completely legal and in the baby's best interest. My hands were shaking as I read the letter twice, then 3 times. Margaret had been planning this for months. She'd somehow connected with this Jennifer Chen woman, convinced her to give up her baby, and then, what? Stolen my Lucas to give to Jennifer instead? The pieces started falling into place. Margaret's insistence on staying with us those first weeks. Her taking over the night shift so completely. Her constant comments about Lucas being perfect and how much she wanted to protect him. But why? Why would she want to give away my baby and replace him with someone else's? I heard the front door open downstairs. Margaret was back from shopping. I quickly shoved everything back into the bag and returned it to the closet, then crept back to my bedroom on shaking legs. Sarah? How's everything going up there? Margaret called from downstairs. Fine. I called back, hoping my voice sounded normal. Just resting. I needed to find Lucas. I needed to know where my real baby was and get him back before David came home. But I also needed to be smart about this. If I confronted Margaret directly, she might deny everything or worse, disappear with Lucas permanently. I spent the afternoon making phone calls while Margaret was busy downstairs. I called Blessed Beginnings Adoption Services, pretending to be interested in their services. The woman I spoke with was friendly but vague about their process. We specialize in private, discreet arrangements, she explained. Many of our clients value privacy above all else. When I mentioned Margaret's name, there was a long pause. I'm sorry, I can't discuss specific clients or arrangements. But if you're interested in our services, I'd be happy to set up a consultation. I hung up feeling more confused than ever. If this was a legitimate adoption service, why would they be involved in stealing babies? Unless Margaret had lied to them too, somehow convinced them that Lucas was hers to place for adoption. My phone buzzed with a text from David, working late tonight. Mom said she'd stay over again. Love you. Perfect. This would give me time to figure out my next move. That evening, after Margaret had settled the baby, Marcus, for the night, I decided to take a direct approach. Margaret, can we talk? I asked, finding her in the kitchen making tea. Of course, dear. What's on your mind? I sat down across from her, studying her face carefully. I've been worried about Lucas. He seems different lately. Fussier. His feeding schedule is off. Babies go through phases, she said, the same response as before. He's growing so quickly. I'm thinking of taking him to the pediatrician tomorrow. Just to be safe. For just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Panic? But it was gone so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. Oh, I don't think that's necessary, she said quickly. He's perfectly healthy. New mothers tend to worry about every little thing. Still, I think I should. You know how pediatricians are about those early checkups. Sarah. Margaret set down her teacup and reached across to take my hand. You've been under so much stress. The surgery, the recovery, adjusting to motherhood. Maybe you're just overthinking things. There was something in her tone that made my skin crawl. A patronizing quality that I'd never heard from her before. I'm his mother, I said firmly. I know when something's wrong with my baby. Margaret's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Of course you are. I just don't want you to worry unnecessarily. Why don't you get some rest? I'll handle the night shift again. That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I watched the camera feed like a hawk, waiting to see what Margaret would do. Around 1 a.m., she entered the nursery as usual. But instead of just checking on the baby, she stood there for a long time, just staring down at him. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. The camera had audio, but she was speaking too quietly for me to make out the words. The call lasted about 5 minutes. After she hung up, she picked up Marcus and held him close, whispering something I couldn't hear. When she put him back in the crib, I could swear I saw tears on her face. The next morning, Margaret announced that she needed to run some errands and would be gone most of the day. Will you be okay alone with Lucas? She asked. I'll be fine, I said, noting how she still called him Lucas even though she knew his real name was Marcus. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I was on the phone with David. I need you to come home, I said. Right now. Sarah, I'm in the middle of. David, I'm serious. Something is very wrong and I need you here. 20 minutes later, David walked through the front door looking worried and confused. What's going on? You sounded panicked. I led him to my laptop where I had the camera footage ready to play. I need you to watch something. And I need you to keep an open mind. I showed him the footage from that first night. David's face went pale as he watched his mother carefully switch one baby for another. This can't be real, he whispered. Mom would never, there has to be an explanation. I showed him the papers I'd found in her bag, the correspondence about the adoption, the birth certificate for Marcus Chen. David sat in stunned silence for several minutes, staring at the evidence. Where's Lucas? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. I don't know. But we're going to find him. David called his mother while I held his hand for support. Mom, we need to talk. Can you come home? Now? She arrived 30 minutes later, her usual cheerful self until she saw both of us sitting at the kitchen table with grim expressions. What's wrong? She asked, immediately defensive. Has something happened? David pulled out his laptop and turned it toward her. We need you to explain this. I watched Margaret's face as she saw the camera footage of herself switching the babies. The color drained from her cheeks, but she didn't deny it. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough, I said. Where is my son? Margaret sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her 64 years. He's safe. He's with a family who can give him everything. He's with his family. I exploded. We're his family. David and I are his parents. You don't understand, Margaret said, tears starting to fall. I was trying to protect him. To give him the best possible life. David leaned forward, his voice shaking with emotion. Mom, what are you talking about? We are his family. We love him. We want him. Margaret looked at her son with such sadness that for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. David, sweetheart, I know you love Sarah, but she's not strong enough to be a mother. The postpartum depression, the anxiety, the way she's been struggling. Lucas needs stability. He needs parents who can provide for him properly. I felt like she'd slapped me. I don't have postpartum depression. I'm adjusting to being a new mother, which is completely normal. And what do you mean we can't provide for him? David has a good job, we have a home, we have everything a baby needs. You're living paycheck to paycheck, Margaret said. David's salary barely covers your mortgage and student loans. What happens when Lucas needs college money? Private school? What if he gets sick and needs expensive medical care? We'll figure it out, David said firmly. That's what parents do. They figure it out. The Hendersons can give him so much more, Margaret continued as if David hadn't spoken. Robert is a surgeon, Patricia is a lawyer. They have a beautiful home in West Hills, they can afford the best schools, the best opportunities. They've been trying to have a baby for 8 years. My brain was struggling to process what she was saying. You gave my baby to strangers? Not strangers. I've known Patricia since high school. She's a wonderful woman who will love Lucas like her own son. She'll give him advantages that you never could. I stood up so fast my chair fell over. He's not yours to give away. You stole him from us. I was thinking of his future, Margaret said, her voice rising to match mine. I've seen what happens to children who grow up without enough resources. I lived it. David's father left us with nothing, and I had to work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. I won't let my grandson struggle like that. David was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. So you decided our baby would be better off with other people? Without even asking us? Without giving us a chance? You would have said no, Margaret said simply. You would have insisted you could handle it, just like every young couple does. And then Lucas would have suffered for your pride. The casual way she said it, like stealing babies was a reasonable solution to financial concerns, made me want to scream. Where are they? Where are the Hendersons? Margaret pressed her lips together. I won't tell you that. Then I'm calling the police, I said, reaching for my phone. Wait, Margaret said quickly. Please, just wait. Let me call Patricia. Let me explain the situation. Maybe we can work something out. Work something out? David's voice was deadly quiet. Mom, you kidnapped our baby. You committed a felony. There's nothing to work out except getting Lucas back and deciding whether to press charges. Margaret's face crumpled. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting him. By traumatizing his parents? By making us think we were caring for our own child when he was actually a stranger's baby? I gestured toward the nursery where Marcus was sleeping. Speaking of which, does this baby's real mother know where he is? Does Jennifer Chen think her son was placed with a nice adoptive family when he's actually here with us? Jennifer is, she's going through some things. Drug addiction, no stable housing. Marcus is better off here temporarily. Temporarily? I felt like I was losing my mind. You can't just shuffle babies around like chess pieces. These are human beings, not objects you can move around to suit your idea of what's best. David put his head in his hands. Mom, how could you do this? How could you lie to us for weeks while we bonded with someone else's baby? Because I love you both, Margaret said, crying openly now. I love you so much that I couldn't bear to watch Lucas grow up struggling the way we did. The Hendersons can give him everything, the best schools, college tuition, travel, opportunities you can't even imagine. We can give him love, I said. We can give him parents who wanted him, who planned for him, who will be there for him no matter what. That's worth more than money. Margaret shook her head. Love doesn't pay for college. Love doesn't buy him into the right social circles or give him connections for his career. I've watched too many bright children waste their potential because their families couldn't afford to nurture their talents properly. I realized that arguing with her was pointless. She genuinely believed she'd done the right thing, which somehow made it even worse. "I'm calling the police," I said again. "Please," Margaret begged. "Give me 24 hours. Let me call Patricia and explain what happened. Maybe she'll agree to reverse the arrangement." "Reverse the arrangement?" David stared at his mother incredulously. "You mean give us back our stolen baby?" How generous of her. But I found myself hesitating. The police would mean investigations, paperwork, possibly criminal charges against Margaret. It would mean David losing his mother, Marcus being taken into protective services, a media circus if word got out. Maybe it would be better to resolve this quietly if possible. 12 hours, I said finally. You have 12 hours to get my baby back here. If Lucas isn't home by midnight tonight, I'm calling 911. Margaret nodded quickly. Thank you. I'll make this right, I promise. After she left, David and I sat in stunned silence. The baby we'd been caring for, Marcus, was napping peacefully in his carrier, completely unaware that his whole world was about to change again. I can't believe she did this, David said eventually. I can't believe my own mother stole our baby. What are we going to do about Marcus? I asked. I mean, I know he's not ours, but I've been caring for him for days. Feeding him, changing him. He feels like. I can't just hand him over to strangers either. David nodded. We need to find out more about his real situation. If his mother really is struggling with addiction and homelessness, maybe there's a way to help them both rather than just separating them permanently. The next few hours were the longest of my life. Margaret called around 3 p.m. to say she'd spoken with Patricia Henderson and they were discussing options. She called again at 6 p.m. to say there were complications that needed to be worked out. What kind of complications? I demanded. Legal issues. The adoption paperwork was already filed. It's not as simple as just switching the babies back. There shouldn't have been any adoption paperwork. I screamed into the phone. You forged our signatures, didn't you? You pretended you had legal custody of Lucas. The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. At 8 p.m., David's phone rang. It was Margaret again. The Hendersons want to meet with you, she said. They want to discuss the situation in person. Absolutely not, I said when David repeated the message. I'm not negotiating for my own baby. They need to bring him home right now or I'm calling the police. But David looked thoughtful. Maybe we should hear what they have to say. If they're reasonable people who were lied to by Mom, maybe they'll understand and do the right thing. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a family restaurant about halfway between our house and West Hills. Margaret would bring Lucas, and we'd figure out how to handle Marcus's situation afterward. At 9 p.m., we walked into that restaurant carrying Marcus in his car seat, both of us nervous wrecks. I spotted them immediately, a well-dressed couple in their early 40s sitting in a corner booth. The woman was holding a baby carrier, and even from across the room, I could see Lucas's distinctive dark hair. My heart started pounding as we approached their table. The woman, Patricia Henderson, looked up with tears in her eyes. You must be Sarah and David, she said softly. I'm Patricia, and this is my husband Robert. Robert stood and shook David's hand awkwardly. Please, sit down. We have a lot to talk about. I couldn't take my eyes off Lucas, sleeping peacefully in the carrier next to Patricia. He looked exactly the same as when I'd last seen him, but somehow different too. He was wearing clothes I'd never seen before, and his hair looked like it had been trimmed slightly. How is he? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He's perfect, Patricia said, fresh tears falling. He's been eating well, sleeping through the night. He's such a good baby. He's our baby, David said firmly but not unkindly. We appreciate that you've taken good care of him, but we need him to come home with us." Robert cleared his throat. This is an incredibly difficult situation for everyone involved. Margaret told us that you had decided you weren't ready for parenthood. That you wanted Lucas placed with a family who could provide better for him. She lied, I said. We never agreed to give up our baby. We didn't even know he'd been taken until yesterday. Patricia's face went white. She said you'd signed papers. She showed us documentation. Forged, David said. We never signed anything. The Hendersons exchanged a look of horror. We had no idea, Robert said. We thought this was a legitimate private adoption. We'd been working with an attorney, everything seemed legal and above board. Margaret showed us photos of you, Patricia added. She said you were both struggling with addiction and financial problems. She said you wanted what was best for Lucas but couldn't face the actual handover, which is why you weren't involved in the process directly. I felt sick. She showed you photos of us? From your social media accounts, Patricia said quietly. Photos of your wedding, your pregnancy announcement. She seemed to know so much about your lives that we never questioned her story. The scope of Margaret's deception was breathtaking. She'd essentially created an entire fictional narrative about our family to convince these people that stealing our baby was justified. We want to do the right thing, Robert said. But this is complicated. We've already filed adoption papers with the court. We've told our families, our friends. Patricia has taken a leave of absence from work to bond with Lucas. His name is Lucas, I said sharply. Not whatever you've been calling him. We've been calling him Lucas too, Patricia said softly. Margaret told us that was the name you'd chosen for him. For some reason, that small detail hit me harder than anything else. They'd kept his name. They'd honored that one piece of his identity even as they participated in his theft. We need him back, David said. Tonight. I'm sorry for what you've been put through, but he belongs with us. Patricia looked down at Lucas, then back at us. What about Marcus? She asked, glancing at the baby carrier we'd brought. Margaret explained that situation too. What exactly did she tell you? I asked. That his mother is homeless and addicted to drugs. That she can't care for him properly but refuses to terminate her parental rights. Margaret said you'd agreed to care for him temporarily while she worked on a more permanent solution. I exchanged a look with David. Even in this impossible situation, Margaret had somehow managed to manipulate everyone involved. We don't know what the real story is with Marcus, I admitted. But we know it's not our decision to make. He needs to be with his real mother, and if she needs help, then she needs real help, not someone stealing her baby. Patricia was crying openly now. I can't just give him up, she whispered. I know he's not legally ours yet, and I know this whole situation is wrong, but I love him already. These past few days, I've felt like his mother. I understood exactly how she felt, because I'd been feeling the same way about Marcus. The arbitrary nature of motherhood, how quickly you can bond with any baby you're caring for, was part of what made Margaret's crime so cruel. Patricia, I said gently, I know this is hard. But imagine if someone had taken your baby from you right after birth and given him to strangers. Imagine not knowing where he was or whether he was safe. That's what we've been going through. Robert put his arm around his wife. We have to do the right thing, he said quietly. This isn't how we wanted to become parents. Patricia nodded through her tears and carefully lifted Lucas from his carrier. He's been a perfect baby, she said, placing him in my arms. He loves to be sung to, and he sleeps better on his left side. The moment I held Lucas again, I knew. He felt right in my arms in a way that Marcus hadn't. The shape of his head, the way he curled his fingers, the soft sound of his breathing, everything was exactly as I remembered. Thank you, I whispered to Patricia. I know how hard this must be. What happens now? Robert asked. With Margaret, I mean. And with the legal aspects of all this. David and I looked at each other. We'd been so focused on getting Lucas back that we hadn't fully considered the aftermath. I don't know, David admitted. She's my mother, but what she did was unforgivable. She committed multiple felonies. She traumatized all of us. She put everyone's children at risk. We need to involve the authorities, I said. Not just for us, but for Marcus. His real mother deserves to know where her baby is and what's happened to him. Patricia nodded. We'll cooperate fully with any investigation. We have all the documentation Margaret provided us, including the forged papers she claimed were from you. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Patricia asked one more question. Will you let us know how things turn out? With all of this, I mean. We genuinely care about Lucas, even though we understand he's not ours. I found myself nodding. I will. And Patricia? You seem like wonderful people. I hope you find your way to parenthood through legitimate means. You'll make great parents someday. The drive home was surreal. Lucas slept peacefully in his car seat while Marcus dozed in my arms. Two babies whose lives had been completely disrupted by one woman's misguided attempt at playing God. When we got home, Margaret was waiting in our driveway. Thank God, she said when she saw Lucas. I was so worried when Patricia called and said she was meeting with you. I thought maybe. You thought maybe what? David interrupted. That they'd refuse to give us back our stolen baby? Margaret looked genuinely confused by his anger. I thought maybe there would be complications. Legal issues that couldn't be resolved quickly. The only legal issues are the ones you created, I said. By forging documents, lying to the Hendersons, and kidnapping our son. I didn't kidnap anyone, Margaret protested. I was facilitating a private adoption for Lucas's own good. Without our consent, David said. That's kidnapping, Mom. That's a serious felony. Margaret's face crumpled again. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted what was best for everyone involved. What about Marcus? I asked, shifting the sleeping baby in my arms. What exactly is his story? And don't lie to us this time. Margaret sighed. His mother is Jennifer Chen. She's 19, homeless, struggling with addiction. She was living in her car when she gave birth. She contacted Blessed Beginnings because she knew she couldn't take care of a baby in her condition. So she made the difficult decision to place him for adoption, I said. And you decided to, what? Keep him as a backup baby? I thought if the Hendersons fell in love with Lucas, they might be willing to take Marcus too. Two babies, two families who wanted children. It seemed like the perfect solution. The casual way she talked about shuffling human beings around to suit her schemes was chilling. Where is Jennifer now? David asked. I don't know exactly. The adoption agency was handling her side of things. I was just responsible for finding suitable families for the babies. Babies plural? I stared at her. How many babies have you done this with? Margaret looked uncomfortable. This was the first time. I swear. I didn't believe her, but one crisis at a time. We're calling the police, I said. And Child Protective Services. Marcus needs to be properly cared for while they locate his mother and figure out what's really best for him. Please don't involve the authorities, Margaret begged. Think about David's career. Think about your own reputation. This could ruin everything. You should have thought about that before you stole our baby, David said coldly. The police arrived an hour later, followed by a social worker from Child Protective Services. Margaret was arrested on charges of kidnapping, child endangerment, and fraud. The Hendersons were questioned but not charged, since they'd been victims of Margaret's deception as much as we had. Marcus was placed in temporary foster care while the authorities located Jennifer Chen. It turned out she'd been desperately searching for her son ever since Margaret stopped returning her calls 3 weeks earlier. Blessed Beginnings Adoption Services was investigated and shut down for facilitating illegal adoptions. The hardest part was watching David process his mother's betrayal. The woman who'd raised him, who he'd trusted completely, had committed crimes that could send her to prison for decades. The cognitive dissonance was almost unbearable for him. "I keep thinking there must be some explanation I'm missing," he said one night as we sat in the nursery watching Lucas sleep peacefully in his crib. "Some way this all makes sense. Sometimes people we love do terrible things," I said. "That doesn't mean they stopped loving us, but it doesn't excuse what they did either." Margaret was ultimately sentenced to 5 years in prison, though she only served 3. The Hendersons successfully adopted a baby through legitimate channels 2 years later. Jennifer Chin got clean, got housing assistance, and was reunited with Marcus after completing a 6-month rehabilitation program. And us? We moved across the country after the trial, needing distance from the whole situation. David changed careers, becoming a teacher instead of an accountant. We had 2 more children, and Lucas grew up knowing the basic facts about what happened when he was a baby, though we spared him the more traumatic details. Margaret sent letters from prison that we never opened. She sent birthday cards for the kids that we never showed them. When she was released, she tried to contact us multiple times, but we'd built a new life that didn't include her. The hardest part wasn't forgiving Margaret, though that took years. The hardest part was learning to trust our own instincts again. For months after getting Lucas back, I second-guessed every parenting decision, wondered if I was really equipped to be his mother, questioned whether maybe Margaret had been right about our inadequacies. It took therapy and time to realize that loving your child and wanting to provide for them doesn't require being wealthy or perfect. It requires being present, being honest, and being willing to fight for them when necessary. Margaret robbed us of those crucial early weeks of bonding with our son. She traumatized multiple families with her manipulations. She separated children from their parents based on her own twisted logic about what constituted a good enough family. But she didn't win. Lucas came home. Marcus was reunited with his real mother. The Hendersons found their way to parenthood through honest means. And we learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones capable of hurting you the deepest. The nanny camera that captured Margaret's crime is still in Lucas's room, though he's now 7 years old and far too big for anyone to steal from his bed. We kept it as a reminder that vigilance isn't paranoia when it comes to protecting your children. And that trust, once broken, requires extraordinary effort to rebuild. Margaret tried to play God with our family, deciding who deserved which children based on her own prejudices and fears. She thought money mattered more than love, that her judgment was superior to ours as parents, that she had the right to separate children from their families for their own good. She was wrong on every count. Have you experienced something like this? Tell me in the comments.